Hey, what's up, guys? So this is gonna be exhibition game five, and today I have my guest, a two-time world champion, Mr. Ben Seeley of the United States, with me, and we'll be playing an XOT random opening game with a time control of 20 minutes and a fixture settings of 10 seconds. That means for every move we make, we get an incremental time of 10 seconds. So assuming that we make all the moves in the game, we actually have a total time limit of 25 minutes. So I think that's a fair amount of time to actually talk through our thinking process before making each move. So right now I have Mr. Ben Seeley with me, and perhaps I could actually invite him to say a few words before we begin.
Hi, Master Alex. It's nice to play with you and join your club here, and I hope we'll be able to create some entertainment for your fans around the world.
Okay, maybe I'll just give a quick note. Due to some technical issues, we'll be going with play okay and 30 minutes time control. So good luck, Ben.
Good luck, Alex.
Okay, so I'll be playing black at this position. I'm gonna go. I'm thinking either c4 or d6 would be my top picks over here. Because going over here to maybe g5 tends to be a little bit too dispersed and allows white to control the center. I think e3 is also an option here, but somehow I don't really want to give up d6. So for me, I think d6 almost seems like a clear option. Okay, so I'll go ahead with d6.
Seems like a good move. I could do c4, which is a very explosive move. Bomb joke. Or maybe e7, but probably not. Because you immediately have good moves right after e7. So like if I do c4 first and then I do e7 later, then you probably wouldn't want to do c6 after that. So the c4 move helps to poison the c6. One unfortunate thing is that play OK does not have the board coordinates right next to it. So so you might want to. I don't know if everybody who's watching would know where A1 is and where H8 is on the board. But you can play the C4 move, and then if you want to explain the coordinates, you can do that. Or I guess maybe there's some other way to do that. Go ahead, C4. Or sorry, I have to do that. Oh, yeah, C4.
Okay, yeah, yeah. I mean, you're right about that. Not having the coordinates. Yeah, I think some people did give feedback that it's hard to actually read all the coordinates. So maybe just to orientate people, this would be the A1 corner, and this would be H8. So the rows are numbered 1 through 8, and the columns would be A through H.
Yeah, it's unfortunately not the same as in chess.
Right.
But
Okay, so Ben has played quite a centralizing move in the form of c4. Um, so if I were to just one of my top picks would probably be to just instinctively play g5. Also because it only flips one disc in one direction and fairly centralizes my discs. And of course, I would sort of be abandoning the c3 disc per se, and then just constructing my shape to the right and probably to the bottom right. Um, yeah, and then waiting for opportunities to try to look for quiet moves. Um, so the only concern is extending to the right and maybe poisoning my moves to the top. So I'm not too sure whether I want to do that first. Okay, I think another option would be probably b5, but that seems too dispersive, and it would also poison the future move to d3. So one last consideration would probably be c6 to regroup into the center. I think there is this Japanese theory that values moves that are within the center 16 squares quite a bit, um, almost regardless of how ugly it looks. But yeah, unless it's flipping way too many discs. Uh, And then another option would be probably e3 as well. So I think e3 poisons g5 and g5 poisons e3. Given these two options, I think sorry, G5 actually. So E3 and G5, and then G5 disk is probably a lot more removable than E3. So I'm just gonna go ahead with G5.
Yeah, removable is a good word. Like if you're creating poison, but the opponent might take that poison away in the future, then that's you don't have to worry about it. And yeah, I think the Japanese call the center 16 squares the box, which is a very efficient term for it. So I look around. I don't really see any good choices other than to play h6. And I think if black plays maybe e3, then white can play d3, and then if black then plays the quiet g4, white can just play f3. So the pattern of white playing to d3 after e3, which maybe what will happen is called a fork. In the USA, we've been taken to calling that a fork, where it creates these two nice moves, basically, where the opponent can play one, but then you get the other. So I'm going to play h6.
So I think yeah. So you mentioned the term the fork. So whereby you provide two options. I think Makoto also did teach us something about that as well. Like in mid game, you typically give two options to your opponent to either force mistakes or give basically an easy way out for yourself as well, just to set up moves. So that's interesting. Yeah. So
that's a different aspect. That's a different aspect of the fork, but that's a good idea. I mean, Makoto plays a lot to make it possible for the opponent to make a mistake, where he's not trying to play so perfectly. He's trying to outplay his opponent, but by making mistakes himself sometimes, but his opponent will be likely to make even bigger mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So usually for openings, what I find difficult is just trying to make the first couple of moves correctly, because it almost seems like the opening moves are harder to make. But once the game moves on to more of a mid-game situation, and if you're still within an even or just slightly trailing behind in that position, you could probably still look for good moves. Or if you're leading, it's probably generally easier to look for good moves. In this case, once white has played h6, what I like to call is a head and tail theory. So h6 being the head of the entire diagonal row between h6 to f4, that would be like an entire continuous row. So at the tail end of it, I always find that it's a possible nice move for me, and it's fairly quiet as well. And then I would then access that move almost intuitively from there. So I think right now E3 seems to be one of the top options for me. If I just go to D3, it would just give white an easy option to E3 to just cut across and centralize. And if I were to play F3 instead of E3, it almost seems like unnecessarily flipping more disks and then probably creating poison. If I went to E3 and white goes to D3, like Ben mentioned earlier, I could go to G4. So I'm going with E3.
Yeah, and here I feel probably pretty forced. I have to do either D7 or take D3 myself if I want to make sure that you don't get D3, which is a very nice interior move. Where you also get to join up your disc, which tends to be nice. And so I could try something like D7, but I think I want to illustrate the forking idea, so I'll just go ahead and play to G3 myself.
So opponent has played the G3. So one of the ways to actually identify good moves intuitively is to make moves that only flips a disk that is surrounded by all the existing disks, including the one that you might be making right now. So G4 almost shouts out to me as a potential good move. And of course, to follow through, perhaps if I play G4, I would anticipate that white plays f3 to regroup to the center, and then I might have to consider what are my options to either f2 or maybe h4 to continue the game. So another option is to just regroup into the center, maybe to d2, I guess. But d2 poisons g4. So once I play that, I tend to. It's probably more expected for me to actually lose that move. So I'm just trying to weigh between d2 and g4. So I think g4 is more important because if I play it and then it follows with f3, and if I were to play d2 and white goes e2, I can still go to c2 perhaps, having this established at f5. So I'll go ahead with g4.
Okay, and then my move is pretty likely to be pretty forced here again. So I don't want you to get the f3 move, so I would want to take it myself. That's a nice move for me as well. The phrase I think of for this is I think of it as neutral plausibility. Like if you have a really plausible move, perhaps the best move, like just pretending as though it were your own turn. If I pretend that it's black's turn, I would think, okay, black probably wants to play f3 here. And so is it also a plausible move for me? And it is. So mutually plausible moves are usually pretty good. This is both offense and defense at the same time. Like in Othello, each player has a turn on their own. And it's not like in football or basketball where the teams are both playing at the same time. So it's sort of like you get to play both offense and defense at the same time. Anyway, so I'll play f3. So that's the fork. When I played to d3, black got to play to g4, which was a nice move, but then I got the nice move at f3.
Okay.
But the fact that d3 initially looked kind of loud, maybe a little ugly, was fine.
Yep. Okay, so for me, I think almost intuitively, I would actually first consider f2 to just sort of continue that centralized shape. Also because white doesn't have access to h3 right now. I'm thinking of consecutive moves from f2 to e2, and then if opponent plays d2, I can still play like maybe g3. So another option would be h4 perhaps, but h4 gives up an easy g3 for white perhaps. So I'm going to go ahead with f2.
So that's cool. So as white, I would be looking at I could do maybe d7, maybe e7, or I would look at perhaps g3. G3 looks kind of ugly. It's just instead of getting 2 or 3 moves out of the region, I'm just getting the 1. But because of black's f2 disk, white would because of the f2 disk, black is poisoned on that right edge. So maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's worth it. The appeal of a move like e7 is that I would get access to h3, and if I can get access to h3, then I also get access to e2, and maybe I could also end up getting the g3 move later. So that's a lot to hope for. So it might be worth it, even though the e7 move looks so loud and not very careful. I'm guessing it's probably okay. And it also removes black's move to h4, just maybe a tiny bit. So I'm just looking to see if there's anything terrible that could happen. E7, C7 seems plausible. E7, H5 seems plausible. But either way, no matter which one black does, white will have a nice move after. So like if it's E7, H5, then white could just go to C6, for example. this is something about some sorts of poison moves is that ironically they can sort of create quieter moves later on. Like if I were to go c6 here, it would be super ugly. But if I put e7 in first, then that c6 move becomes a lot nicer looking. So it's sort of a weird thing. All right, so I'm going to do e7 and hope for the best.
Okay, so I think e7 was a fairly unexpected move. I probably wouldn't consider that, but yeah, now that you've mentioned it, it almost seems to make a little sense as well in terms of the how you actually change up the shape. So I think one of the reasons why I was really looking forward to this game as well is to try to understand how you think. In fact, I think many players always say that they don't really understand how Ben plays, how the top blitz players play, like maybe demigods or on online. So I think that's an interesting point to take note. For me, right now, I can see that White's intention. I mean, also because Ben mentioned that is perhaps to just play a move and also try to access H3. So, given that the fact the only way that I can prevent H3 from happening is a little ugly in the form of D7, doesn't really make sense for me to play such a loud move. And then poisoning the move would probably mean H5, which doesn't really, which generally gives white a very strong control to the consequent free squares after h5 and h4. So the third approach would be taking the move itself, which right now I can't really take the move to h3. So I would probably think about the fourth approach, which is ignoring the approach and just allowing Ben to form up that shape. One way that I could perhaps ignore that approach is actually to play b4. But if b4, h3, and then followed by maybe c6, and if Ben goes to e2, I think it seems a bit too difficult for me as well in terms of tempo, and the shape would favor him so much. So I guess the speed for me to actually reach E2 would be quite critical as well. And B4 probably poisons the future E2. So right now I would favor C7 slightly more to keep E2 clean and then allow him to actually play H3 and then just sort of jump into E2 to defend the line. And if he does go to D2, I would be able to probably jump back to G3, I guess. So I'll go ahead with C7.
Yeah, I think I would have played b4 there, just to set up a lot of threats of different quiet moves. And the C7 poisons b4, but b4 did not poison c7. So sometimes that's a good way to choose moves. Is play the one that doesn't poison the other one. If you can hope to get both, then that's how I do it. So okay. Here, sometimes a move like c6 is attractive, but the problem is that black could just immediately play e8, and then that would take away the e6 disk, and then I would lose my access to h3. So I'm going to play h3. Theoretically, I could play d7, but that's probably too dispersed as you've been using. That's a good word.
Okay.
Yeah. And I wanted to explain that h3 move. It's also about if it's a somewhat more early beginner sort of tactic, but if I have h3 and h6 like that, at any point black can play either h4 or h5, but then I get to play the other move. And so it's a split, but it's an even split. It could also be described as an ongoing fork, because at any time you can play one, but then I get the other. So I got these two tempo on the right edge. I got both h3 and h6. So getting a lot more tempo on the edge than the other player is often a good thing.
Okay.
I'll stop taking up your time. Go ahead.
Okay. So I'll go ahead to play e2 as planned before, because the speed to e2 is rather important. If white takes e2, he sort of carves out another good move for him to sort of prepare to enter G3. E2 with the anticipation of maybe D2 or even G3 itself. That sort of pushes me out of position. So right now this setup to the bottom left is also sort of waiting for white to sort of unpoison b4 as well. So let me see. So I'm gonna go ahead with e2 just to actually just continue maintaining that center shape as much as possible. But it almost seems like I'm beginning to trail behind due to the poison that I'm setting up for myself, and also the nice edge shape that white is actually preparing for himself. Okay, I'll just go ahead with e2 right now.
Yeah, I think there's no way that's a big mistake, or at least I hope not. So here, I would, I'd probably do d2 or c6, more likely c6. Because if black plays again up top, if black plays d2 or c2, then that actually makes the move to g3 nicer, since I don't have to flip the e3 and f3 black discs when I play the g3, so that could be good. But if I play the c6, then that does poison b4. Well, another option is that white could just play to e1, and then black will lose the access to c2. It does poison white making a move to g3, so that's problematic. And it also unpoisons black moving to b5, for example. I'm going to do c6. I have a plan. And also c6 takes away black's f8. Let's see if Alex plays into my plan, and then if he does, I guess I'll explain it.
So opponent has played c6. I think that's fairly unexpected as well. So c6 provides access to g3, which is currently poisoned. But if I were to just take any of these moves and remove the d3 disc, then this would suddenly be an excellent move for white. So I could choose to probably prevent it. But if I prevent it, I'd seem to be using way too many moves. Another option would be to just take up the quiet move that has opened up to b4. So that could be an option as well. Okay, so I guess after weighing between b4 and d7, I feel somewhat inclined to actually play b4 first. Because basically b4 doesn't poison d7, but d7 poisons b4 quite badly. So I'm gonna go ahead with b4 move.
Yeah, I agree with b4. I'm choosing here between d2 and b5. Sort of in both cases trying to... The idea with d2 would be d2, g3, and then white would probably play to e1 afterwards. And so in this case, I'm giving g3 away to black, but I can take the h2 tempo at a later time. Maybe that's almost as good. It says set up an unbalanced edge on the right. That's what we call it. And by the way, if anyone doesn't know, a really good resource in English is Brian Rose's Othello book, which is free. So if you just Google Brian Rose Othello book, which I'll type out into Google, you can download that for free. That's fantastic. But my original plan was to play b5. So I thought b5, b3, c2, and then I thought if black plays to d2, then that will unpoison white's move to g3. And then if black plays a6 after that, then that would actually, at that point, unpoison the move to f1. So I would have the very nice quiet move to f1 and then also e1, and just basically be doing an edge creep, as we call it, where you're just creeping along the edge, like a burglar or a ninja. So since that was the original plan, then let's go ahead. I'll try that.
Ben has played b5, and of course he's explained his plan, and yeah, I'm aware of that poison to be a little bit more concerned about that. But the typical response for such a move, almost too intuitively, is to just jump in to b3 and just make a quiet move, just flipping one disc in one direction that is surrounded by the existing discs. You don't really create more moves for your opponent that much. So we'll go ahead with b3.
Yeah, and I think after this, white is fairly forced. This line I played, I think if white had played other moves differently, then white would be losing quite badly. So like if white had not planned on c2 here and played anything else, I think it would be quite bad for white. So I will do that. I mean, it's just part of it is that black is having this threat of playing a6 soon, and then also getting b6 right after that. So that's two very nice, quiet tempo, and then white will be poisoned on that edge on the left. So that's why I have to really hope that I can get really nice tempo on the edge on top, and then by doing that, maybe it'll be worth it. So black is basically edge creeping. So is white. Hopefully, it's good enough for white.
Okay, so opponent has played c2. Definitely d2 almost seems to shout out immediately, but d2 gives up g3 as what Ben mentioned, and of course d2 g3, the natural progression would actually be going to a6. That opens up f1, and if black were to continue with b6 and move towards the bottom, it would probably be not too favorable for black. So generally, even though this is in line with the general guidelines of good moves in flipping two discs that are fairly surrounded by the existing discs, it opens up one quiet move for white that actually helps white to potentially gain multiple tempos to the top. So that is something that I want to avoid as much as possible. I think one option would be maybe to consider one square above d2, d1. And then if you play d1, the weakness here is to actually open up a4 for white over here. So another option is to just bear in mind that the entire 6th row is occupied by white. So I think the weakness of this shape for white is for me to gain multiple tempo to a6 and then followed by b6. And bearing in mind that there aren't any black discs along this mini diagonal between a4 and e8, this a6 wouldn't be vulnerable to a5 attack in terms of the poison move. And I think a6 also just leaves it open up for contention to the top, and if white were to jump in and squeeze into d2, maybe I can jump into g3. So I think I'm going to go ahead to play the a6 move over here and just maybe maintain the center shape.
Yeah, this move I disagree with, but I also think that my earlier b5 move was wrong, since I think it actually would have been quite powerful for black to have done d2 and to just play it out where it go d2 g3, a6 f1, and then because black would just be able to keep playing in the lower left and also up top. And it looked to me like white was in danger of setting up two solid 4 edges. We call them 4s. So like the edge on the right, if it was filled in, that would be a 4. And if they're both solid, as I think we call it in the USA, then black could have just played the X square at G2 or G7 and get a lot of tempo. But if I played G3 here, it would not be that different than the line I just mentioned, where G3 D2 is F1 is actually sort of similar, not 100% the same, but so here I might instead actually just do D2 or maybe even E1. But I think I would probably just go ahead and do G2, maybe, or even D1. That's a forking move, and fork means it's like a fork in the road, So then your opponent takes one side of the fork, you take the other side of the fork. Where it's a weird D1 is a weird move, but then if it actually unpoisons G3 for white, so black may feel forced to take it, even though it's giving up G3 to black. If it goes D1, G3, then white can play to D2, which then becomes a nice interior move. So I think Demigods, Kira,
Yep.
I think he plays a lot of these sorts of moves where he might actually take this weird exterior edge move like D1, but he's actually creating a nice interior move for himself in the process that he's maybe saving for later on. It's like sort of a counterintuitive idea because it's such an exterior-looking move. How can an exterior move create a nice interior move? But that's how it works sometimes.
Yeah, I agree.
And I don't know if that's actually going to work out. It's just fun to look at. All right, let's try it. Let's try D1. I'm sort of tempted to just play some moves just because they're interesting, even though I'm not really that sure that they're any good.
Okay. So opponent has played D1. To be honest, I've never really considered that move, but yeah. I guess it's quite interesting, and sometimes Othello does, you can play creative moves and somehow still end up with a good result if you control the tempo or how it falls into place somehow. So right now, D1 has actually sort of split up the discs into different regions, and of course, now G3 almost seems like an attractive move for white to construct. A balance edge to the right. Just bearing in mind that I still have B6 as a spare move, so the top right suddenly becomes a very active region that I feel I have to respond to, while B6 is more of a spare move, so I'm just waiting on that option. So I think the first one to look at is to take the G3 move, because prevention is not an option. Poisoning it probably means the X square, which is probably not where I want to go. Taking the move itself allows white to jump into the center to D2. So I think I have to respond more to the top instead of the top right. Also because if white takes G3, I can still perhaps give up corners and still try to slot in between and wedge in between the edge. So yeah, this D1 move is actually very beautiful because if I were to just jump into D2, white would be able to take consecutive tempos to the edge. Yeah, so it does seem very difficult right now. I think maybe C1 might be a good passive option to just sort of wait for white's response. But if I lose the access into D1, that would be a bit concerning as well. Almost seems like a trap for me to actually enter to respond to this. Or I could just go to E1 and just sort of wait for white to just jump in over here. Yeah, consolidate the shape to the top and then move down to the left. I guess I'll go ahead with E1 to sort of force a response to somewhere on the top for white so that we can consolidate that shape and don't lose too much tempo. And then probably make use of my B6 move to sort of stay alive, perhaps. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, I agree with that move. I could temporarily block black's access into D2 by playing A3, but it doesn't last. It's probably not worth it. But we'll see here. Also looking at even here, sort of looking at how the corner regions might potentially play out and the main diagonals. So I think in Japan they just simply call them the lines, since they're such important lines. So those are the diagonals going from A1 to H8 and it's going from A8 to H1. Yeah. It shows that that D1 was probably not correct, but I maybe should play D2 to take it away from black. So then black could choose when to play G3, but then I think, but I could probably play H2 after G3, so maybe I'm not throwing away a tempo on balance. So maybe H2 is not quite as nice to play as G3, but either way, I'll get a tempo out of the region. Although black would also get a tempo from the region. I think I'll just do G3. It's a little bit safer.
Okay, so right now white has played into G3. I think D2 is probably just sort of shouting out to me to just jump in to occupy and just finish up this shape to the top left. And then I would anticipate D2, C1, and then not too sure that I should actually be grabbing B1. But if I do take B6, white just takes up a double balance edge. That doesn't seem to be too attackable for me because the E2 disc will still remain as black for me right after that exchange. So just trying to explore any other options available. Maybe D2, C1, and then jump into G2 perhaps. That's one option. Yeah, so I guess bearing in mind of time, I'll just go into D2 first as the obvious move.
Yeah, and I didn't see any other good move for black really, so and then I think C1 is basically forced so that black doesn't get it. Just go ahead. Plus, I'm hoping to tempt you to take B1. That would probably be okay for me. Also, if I play C1 and then get to take F1 after B6 here, then it will be a nice 4, like I mentioned before, a 4 edge.
Okay, yeah. So right now B6 is supposed to be my spare move, but yeah, I think usually when this setup is like so, and opponent is actually initializing, capturing an edge, I would usually be forced to just grab it due to tempo. So I think I'm just gonna go ahead and grab it to B1 just so I don't lose tempo. I think if I go B6 and allow white to consolidate that position with a double balance edge and losing tempo and having the next move to play, it would be even harder for me to continue the game. So I think I think earlier I didn't notice that C1 actually cuts out the E3 disc as white. So right now I would still have this D4 disc that provides access to B6. So I'll go ahead with B1.
And that move I did not agree with. I thought black should have played G2, which Alex did seem to consider.
Yep.
Just to get the tempo, try to get parity, and then save B6. Whereas now I can play A4, and then his B6 move is much more poison. So I think I'm probably kind of forced to do A4. I could maybe try to do G1 or something, but I think I should save that for later.
Okay, yeah, so opponent has played A4, that pretty much poisons and nullifies B6. So I lose the B6 move. So one option is to go for a very early diagonal control to G7, maybe, and just try to force my way to gain back the tempo that I lost at B6. Since B6 is already fairly poisoned, that would be one option, to go for a forced diagonal control. And even if white were to just try to capture the C3 disc by playing A3, I could still just maintain the diagonal control across, maybe. And this mini diagonal that A4 move has created between B4 and E7, I think I could probably capitalize a little bit on that with G7 and future moves to D. Yeah, I think I'm probably forced to play G7 actually, because if I don't do that, I lose the diagonal control, and then I play somewhere else, I lose 2 tempos. So I think I'm going with G7 just as a gamble.
Yeah, that was a nice move, and not much of a gamble. I didn't consider it. That's the problem. I had thought that A4 was pretty forced and didn't see that they leave such a nice diagonal control for black. May have to get fancy or something like that. So I think black is threatening to do D8, which is a very nice quiet move. So I should maybe try to do something about that. And an idea I'm thinking of doing is playing either A2 or B2 soon. Because I need to somehow get access to H8, I think. And there's really no way to do that. So unless maybe playing something like B2 at some point, and then black takes A1, and then I do A2, black plays A3. Now I have to get him to get a disc on the line in between A3 and or just any disc on that diagonal line going down to F8 from H3. Because then if he plays to H3, then I can cut the diagonal. I can flip the C3 disc by playing into A5. But I need to get him on that diagonal first. So if I play E8 and then he does F8 or G8, then he'll be on that diagonal. Plus, I also, if I were to play A2 instead of B2, I want him to be poisoned when he goes into A3. But I don't think A2 is going to be in the cards. I think it would probably have to be something like B2 instead. But it's ugly for me no matter what. I just have to do E8 and hope something interesting happens.
Okay, Ben has played E8, so that sort of breaks the structure, the nice 2 consecutive tempo that I wanted to go to perhaps D8 and then followed by D7 in that shape. So over here, I would see this diagonal control as something that is very strong for me to control the tempo at the moment. So I would just go with a simple, quiet F8 and then hope to get consecutive moves again to D8 and D7. So let's go with F8.
Yeah, it's very hard to find anything for white here. Black may end up with a really nice big solid win, but we'll see. Maybe I should do B2 right away. Well, that might be good. Let's try it. Very odd move, but...
Yeah, B2 is probably something I didn't expect as well. I think B2 is probably forcing the access to the corner to H8. So if I were to take the corner right now to A1 and then white goes in to jump in for A2, to play A3 to some extent to try to defend that line, because this line is that lead diagonal is going to be reversible for white to just take back those discs, and if I were to do that, this would be fairly poisoned. Another option for me is to perhaps play H7 to actually poison the corner approach for H8, and then allow white to sort of take the corner first and then reverse that lead diagonal.
And watch your timer, Alex.
Yep, okay. And then perhaps I could just play D8 as well and just ignore that approach and just go for a D8 and then D7 and then just hope for the best. That's one option. So I'm not too sure whether parity will work out fine for me in that option. I am tempted to just play D8 and just ignore that approach and just go D7 again, even after the corner is played, and then just sort of pray that it works out. Because short of time, I guess, and just bank on the fact that this is reversible. So I guess I'm going to go ahead with a gamble to D8.
Seems good. Not much of a gamble. Definitely not much of a gamble.
Yeah.
Hard to find much of anything. And I'm worried about a bunch of things. Don't want to give away the main thing I'm worried about, but Alex probably sees it already anyway. All right, I'm going to take the... probably not a great idea, but let's just take the corner.
Okay, so I'm just going to stick with my original plan and just go to D7, I guess.
Yeah.
And then just hope for some parity to the right.
Mm-hmm. So if I play G1 here, then black would be pretty poisoned. And I think I might be able to get... I don't really want to play G8 here, and I don't want to be forced to play G8. because then black has the h7 square saved up as a tempo to try to get parity later on. So if I played a b8, then black could just force it out with c8, and then I would take g8. And if I play c8 here or something like that, then black can play to a. Well, that's this problem either way. No matter whether, even if I play g1 here, and if white plays, if black plays a5, then I can't play into a3, which is what I really want to do. For some sort of a swindle. Also hoping to maybe control the h2 to b8 line.
Just a quick reminder on time as well.
Yeah, thank you. I've definitely been playing a lot of desperation since I've been behind. Nothing good, nothing good. All right, maybe I'll just play b8 maybe, and maybe I might have to analyze the endgame after the game. Talking about that. I think b8 is interesting, so let's try it. Maybe black can make a mistake.
Yep. So I really wanted to play a5 because I had that momentary diagonal control where I can make consecutive moves, but now b8 has created the d6 disc that allows black to somewhat jump back in. So I think my first instinct is to just play a simple c8 and beg that g8 response and carve out the c3 disc to just jump into the corner, and probably c8, g8 corner, white goes to a2, I go to a3, and if white close off this, I go in here, white jumps in. It might still be somewhat risky for me in terms of tempo, but yeah, and right now I don't really have a way to actually remove both discs to c2 and d2. Okay, but I think it's still a cleaner option, so I'm just going to go ahead with c8 and just sort of hope the shape on the right gives me parity. No, it does seem very strong for white actually. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just secure the corner just for stable discs at the moment.
Yeah, there's a chance that white should do something like b7 here or g1, but I think I should probably play a2, and seems like maybe the parity move. Timer thing. Although maybe I should have used more time on that move. That was probably potentially very important.
Okay, so right now the threat of white taking the entire 7th row is very real for me right now. It's gonna be hard if I take this back and white. Even if I jump into the corner, white takes this. It's gonna be difficult for me to actually continue. Black, white, black, white, black, white. Black. Yeah. So just trying to work out the lines. Not too sure whether I should actually just go for the diagonal control right now. So just based on parity, the left region is a combined 6 square region. I'm thinking of parity to just go right into G2 right now just to get parity. The risk is a quiet B7 on the tail end of it. And yeah, I think I'm just going to go ahead with parity just to hope something works out.
And so I play the relatively quiet X square at the other end to also get access to H1.
Okay, I'm just going to go ahead with this A3 just to force the move.
Yeah, and so maybe I should play H1 here and hope for a swindle where I get both G1 and somehow F1. But if I don't play A5, then I lose any possible access to...
yeah.
So anyway, I just have to take it. And I think I lose access anyway. But
okay, I'll jump in to B6.
Yeah. So black is going to get a really beautiful finish, I think. Even though, oops, sorry, that was not the square I meant to.
Oh, okay. Do you want to undo or?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just undo that.
Thank you.
And then I'll play back the B6.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, so right now the concern is if I were to jump in almost to immediately the 2, I'll get swindled. So I'm just gonna create some excess here by playing this H5 move.
Yeah, and that was a big mistake. He should have just played H2. And then after my G1, I can't play it to F1, so he would end up getting F1 anyway. Although this actually, this may not actually lose many deaths, or may not even lose any deaths when it plays out, because black still has parity. But anyway, I think the H5 was not necessary. That's the main point. The black is still going to win. Yeah, it's kind of a similar theme. I could try to do something like F1, but black is an odd region in the upper right, so black is going to get the last move in the region no matter what. So I think I actually get a few more discs just by playing to H4.
Okay, so I'll just go for the parity, and yep, I think I did lose unnecessarily some discs.
Maybe. Or maybe not. Maybe like 1 or 2 discs, something like that. So when I get the solid, sort of play to G1.
Okay, so I'll go for parity, and then...
And if I could, and then I'll play this to my only move, but, if somehow black, could have been forced to play H7 first before A8, then I maybe would have been close at least. So it was a nice solid win for Alex.
Yep.
Well done. My overly hasty A4 was definitely...
Yep. Looking back, I felt that maybe A4 did open up some opportunities for me.
Yeah. Well, just playing to G7, having the beautifully controlled diagonal that I couldn't really do anything about that was acceptable was quite a lot. Yeah.
I think G7 somehow came to me only because I was forced.
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably.
Just I don't like forcing my opponent into good moves.
Yeah. Okay, but I guess it's probably also slightly more advantage for me because I'm playing in the late morning and you're playing probably at night as well, right after dinner. So I think,
it's almost my bedtime.
Yeah,
it's very hot here, but I felt pretty good. I was just played at least one terrible move, so that's not good. Which is, it's good to be more thorough than that instead of just going, this is definitely the right move. It's good to be a little bit more thorough.
Yeah.
I didn't check as thoroughly as I should have. I'm not so used to long games. I mostly play the 1 minute games, so sometimes in the long games I'm overly hasty and I just have my 1 minute instincts kick in. Yeah.
But also because you tried the Kira type of move, right? Maybe the D1 or
well, it seemed I think it was probably played out okay after that.
Okay.
For white, it's just the A4 I think was the problem.
Yep. So thank you very much, Ben, and for participating in this exhibition game. And definitely appreciate you coming on as a guest and giving me an opportunity to play with you.
And well done. I see your undefeated streak is continuing. Maybe this is the secret to how you could win the World Othello Championship, is to just play every game on video while talking.
Maybe, yeah. Or maybe I should just be talking through and talking to myself during each game.
Yeah.